This program is brought to you by cable franchise fees and generous donations from viewers like you.
Welcome to the Amherst Planning Board meeting of October 6th, 2021. My name is Doug Marshall, and as the chair of the Amherst Planning Board, I am calling this meeting to order at 6:33 p.m. This meeting is being recorded and is available live stream via Amherst Media, and minutes are being taken. Pursuant to Chapter 20 of the Acts of 2021, this Planning Board meeting, including public hearings, will be conducted via remote means using the Zoom platform. The Zoom meeting link is available on the meeting agenda posted on the town website's calendar listing for this meeting, or go to the Planning Board webpage and click on the most recent agenda, which lists the Zoom link at the top of the page. No in-person attendance of the public is permitted. However, every effort will be made to ensure the public can adequately access the meeting in real time via technological means. In the event we are unable to do so for reasons of economic hardship or despite best efforts, we will post an audio or video recording, transcript, or other comprehensive record of proceedings as soon as possible after the meeting on the Town of Amherst website. Board members, I will take a roll call. When I call your name, unmute yourself, answer affirmatively, and then please place yourselves back on mute. Maria Chow.
Present.
Jack Jemsek.
Here.
Tom Long.
Present.
Andrew McDougall.
Present.
Janet McGowan.
Here.
And Johanna Newman.
Here.
Thank you. Board members, if technical issues arise, we may need to pause temporarily to fix the problem and then continue the meeting. If the discussion needs to pause, it will be noted in the minutes. Please use the raise hand function to ask a question or make a comment. I will see your raised hand and call on you to speak. After speaking, remember to remute yourself. The general public comment item is reserved for public comment regarding items that are not on tonight's agenda. If appropriate, public comment may also be heard at other times during the meeting. Please be aware, the board will not respond to comments during general public comment period. Please indicate you wish to make a comment by clicking the raise hand button when public comment is solicited. If you have joined the Zoom meeting using a telephone, please indicate you wish to make a comment by pressing *9 on your phone. When called on, please identify yourself by stating your full name and address and put yourself back into mute when finished speaking. Residents can speak their views for up to 3 minutes or at the discretion of the Planning Board Chair. If a speaker does not comply with these guidelines or exceeds their allotted time, their participation will be disconnected from the meeting. All right. So it looks like the first item tonight is our minutes. Pam, do we have minutes to approve?
You do. You have minutes submitted by Maria.
All right. I believe it. Go ahead.
I was just going to say, so they were for the meeting September 29th. They were in your packet.
Good. All right. Does anybody want to make a motion to accept the minutes of September 29th? Andrew.
So moved.
Do we have a second? Mr. Long. All right. Is there any discussion of those minutes? I'm seeing Janet raise her hand. Janet?
So I'm very sympathetic to how hard it would be to take minutes as you're in a meeting. And I hope that your job will be soon relieved, Maria. I did think I'm happy to support these minutes. I just didn't think there was much stuff like about what the planning board, like the discussion was of Mr. Roblowski's 446 Main Street and the Unitarian Church screening. I know that people talked a long time about the problems with the screening on that and made suggestions about ways to fix it. And so it looks like 2 people voted against it, but you can't see why. And so I thought, a lot of these minutes were super comprehensive, especially like the public comments made by people on the parking lot. And so I'm happy to vote for these. I just think that we need to leave more of like a path of breadcrumbs for people to understand why the planning board voted. That's it.
Thank you, Janet. I see Mr. McDougall.
Thanks, Doug. I was just going to compliment Maria for doing this on the fly.
Yeah.
And I would echo what Janet just said. I'm impressed that you could do that and be able to keep up with the conversation as well. But just kudos. Thanks for doing it.
Great. Thank you, Andrew. All right. Is there any more discussion? Seeing none. I guess we can go right into the vote to accept the minutes. All right, Maria.
Approve.
Jack,
I'll approve.
Tom,
Approve.
Andrew,
Aye.
Janet,
Aye.
and Johanna,
Aye.
and I'm an aye, so it's unanimous. Thank you all. All right, so now we'll have the public comment period. And before we start that, I will repeat what I said earlier. So this public comment period is for comments for items that are not on the agenda. The main item on our agenda this evening is the rezoning of the parking lot that's town-owned behind or sort of beside the CVS in the center of town. So this period is for comments that have nothing to do with the rezoning of the CVS parking lot. So does anybody want to make any comments during the comment period? I see 9 attendees. And I see no raised hands. Oh, one from Ronnie Parker. All right, so Pam, do you want to?
I have.
Goodness, I'm so sorry. I do want to comment, but not about what you've just said. So I think I inadvertently touched the hand button.
All right,
So
well then,
thank you.
no problem. Thank you. All right, so that's the end of our public comment period. So now the time is 6:40, and I will open the public hearing on this zoning amendment. So the zoning, it's a zoning bylaw for the official zoning map 14A, parcel 33 rezoning North Prospect Street, continued from July 7th, August 4th, and September 29th, all in 2021, to see if the town will vote to amend the official zoning map to extend the general business district BG to include a vacant parcel of land owned by Town of Amherst in the vicinity of North Pleasant Street, North Prospect Street, Coles Lane, and Amity Street, currently located in the General Residence District RG. All right, so Ms. Brestrup, will you be introducing this, or will we go right to Nate Malloy?
I will be happy to introduce Nate Malloy, and he will make the presentation. And we also have Rob Mora here to answer questions.
All right, thank you. Nate.
Sure, thanks. I also want to mention that Evan is here as well as a proponent of the zoning measure.
That would be Evan Ross, just
Evan
for
Ross,
the
right.
record. Thank you.
I'm going to share my screen. I'm going to just go over the overview document and then the actual zoning language. Actually, what do people see? Is it that it says parking overlay district? Is that?
Yes.
Yes.
Parking facility overlay district.
All right, sorry. Yeah, so we'll share the other screen first. Too many PDFs open sometimes. It's hard to. Thanks. So Nate Malloy, a planner with the town. I'll be talking about the parking facility overlay district. And, it's proposed on, one property, 14A-133, that has frontage on North Prospect Street. And, were some questions about the history of the site and its appropriateness for a parking garage or parking facility. And, so going back about almost 50 years, this site has been identified as a high, likely candidate for a parking facility. And so, over numerous studies, it was, one of the better sites. And even Nelson Nygaard in 2019 said that it is a site with the greatest potential, a municipal owned property with the greatest potential for a parking deck or a larger structure. So I'm not, going to belabor it too much. Some of the earlier studies did include the lot to the south in terms of having a structure, but it's still, my opinion that the site on its own is appropriate and of right size to have a zoning overlay. There's a question about the use of an overlay district and if it could apply to a single property. And, I provided some information that, Massachusetts Smart Growth Toolkit considers an overlay district a really, a really good tool, a flexible tool for unique properties or for zoning, especially because it doesn't supersede it can supersede the underlying zoning, but it's actually on top of it. So, it's its own entity, and it can have incentives or different requirements that then can supersede the underlying zoning. But, they really say it is, it can be a really great tool to use. And because, a parking facility is allowed in the BG zoning district, which abuts, on properties that abut this, there's no concern about this being some type of spot zoning or some issue with it being a, single property overlay. And some of the benefits of an overlay, like I said, is it's a distinct zoning measure, so that if in the future it needs to be changed or modified or removed, it can in its entirety, and the underlying zoning is still in place. Existing conditions of the property, I think it's useful to see the, the site is almost 7/10 of an acre. It's, a surface parking lot. It has been surface parking since the 60s, and it's almost, it's 97% covered by pavement. So it's a non-conforming lot. There's approximately 75 parking spaces on the property. That includes spaces that also are used by CVS south of the last median. So, there's about 70 spaces in the municipal area, but 75 total parking spaces. There are really no side or rear setbacks. It's about 20 to 22 feet from North Prospect Street. The setback and the distance from the curb to the parking area to the edge of the parking is about 35 feet. So, that's just the general characteristic of the lot. It's, it has access from North Pleasant and from the lot to the south. And then, the next page shows what a potential build out of the site could be with the zoning overlay and using Greenfield's parking garage as an example. So, Greenfield has a garage that's 272 spaces. It's 4 levels. It's, basically a rectangle of 120 feet by 204 feet. If that were placed on this site, it would cover 83% of the site. The front setback from North Prospect Street, we're assuming an entry and exit from North Prospect, would range from 15 to 30 feet. The side setback on the south side would, be right along the property line, so there wouldn't be a setback. On the north, it would range from 0 to 40 feet. So, this is an odd shaped lot. And the rear setback, again, would be 0 to, 5 feet or, give or take. The, a previous plan from the 90s showed a garage that was stepped back, every so many spaces it would step back to try to mimic the shape of the lot. And, really that's the decision of a developer or applicant, so, and for a potential build out, it's most easily, a rectangle. Here's an image of Greenfield's garage. This became a cost-effective garage because it was also modular construction. So it was designed using pieces that were brought in, and it was assembled almost like, a big Lego project. It would have been more costly. Originally, they wanted to have decorative friezes and sculptural elements on the facade and different things. But, the shape of it didn't change. It was always this relative shape. I don't know if there's any questions about this at all, or,
Well, I would, at least the Greenfield rendering shows the stairwell outside the rectangular area. So,
right,
so if you have a vertical circulation, might be outside the rectangle you've shown.
right. And so, you know, the proposal in terms of the zoning amendment, in terms of lot and building coverage would allow something, you know, perhaps, you know, outside the rectangle or within it. There's, you know, Greenfield's garage has an elevator and 2 stairwells. And it's really, and then it has, you know, parking on the upper deck. So, you know, there's also some, you know, someone could consider having a covered parking and not having parking on the roof deck too. So there's different variations of how it could be designed. It's a double loaded corridor. So, you know, each half of the garage is 120 feet or 60 feet, you know, it's a double loaded travel lane. And so, you know, you don't have to have that as a garage design, but it is typical to have that.
Okay, thank you, Nate. Chris?
Thank you. I realize I should have taken Doug's opportunity to give an introduction to this zoning amendment. I wanted to say that the zoning amendment was brought to us by, it was sent to us by the town council, and it was initiated by members of town council. And currently they are Evan Ross and George Ryan. There was a third proponent who has since dropped out. But when we looked at the initial proposal, we realized that there were issues related to dimensional requirements. And then once we heard from the public during our first 1 or 2 public hearings, we realized that there were concerns that we could address with an overlay district. So the planning department and the building commissioner actually came up with this idea to recommend an overlay district. And we took what we had heard from the public and we met with, and we came up with this idea. And then we met with the proponents, Evan Ross and George Ryan, and they agreed that this was a good mechanism for moving this rezoning forward. And so I just wanted to explain that a bit because it wasn't something that the planning department initiated. It was something initiated by town council members. And what we're trying to do is, you know, come up with a plan, come up with a zoning amendment that makes sense for this location and addresses some of the concerns that we heard from the public as to height and bulk and massing and what this thing is going to look like, et cetera. So thank you very much for allowing me to make that introduction.
Certainly. Mr. Jemsek?
Thank you. Yeah, so the overlay district, I'm finding, I guess I need more clarification because I was concerned that, so we're not calling this BG anymore. We're making an overlay district for this individual lot. But I know going back, if it was BG, and I said this in the prior meeting and you know, Nate had said, well, we're going to, you know, you don't have to worry about a 5-story building here because I didn't really understand why. So I'm just, I'd like some clarity with regard to what's going on. I guess I'm a little bit lost, yeah, despite, you know, what Chris has said and Nate has said. So I need some help.
Okay, Jack. Nate, do you want to respond to that? And I'm wondering, you haven't really gotten into the specific proposal yet. Would that maybe clarify things for Jack?
Yeah, I was going to mention that I still haven't gone through the zoning amendment language yet either. And so I can do that next. You know, the questions I asked, if there are questions just on what had been presented, but right. So Jack, what we're proposing is on just this property shown here, you know, the municipally owned property, that there's an overlay zone. So we're not changing the underlying zoning. It's an overlay zone that only allows parking facilities as described in the zoning bylaw, you know, in section 3.384. So, you know, public or private parking facility, whether that's a garage or a surface lot. So, you know, so it doesn't replace the zoning. It has its own dimensional standards, which I'll go into in a minute. So it's really, you know, it'd be a separate section added to, you know, Article 3 of the zoning bylaw. And it would only allow for, you know, parking on this property. And so it's not changing the zoning at all. It's not changing, you know, dimensional requirements in the zoning bylaw for RG. It's not going to BG or BL. It's really just a separate overlay zone.
And I believe that that district proposal was in our packet and
Right.
was, I think it was actually what you first showed on your screen.
Yeah, let me go to that. Maybe that'll help if,
But maybe we should let Janet ask her question before you go there.
Thank you, Doug. I just have a quick question for Nate about the Greenfield parking garage. Like, how high is it? What's the height of the garage? And just up to the top
Sure.
deck, and then how high is the tower?
Yeah, so those are good questions. I think, in the zoning overlay, when we get to it, we've said that the height of a garage would go to the highest point of, a parapet wall or railing above any surface deck. So, if this is the street side, it would be, up to the point of, I can zoom in just a little bit on this. Be to the highest point of, say, these columns is the height. And then we excluded, the enclosures for stairs or elevators. And so, the Greenfield garage is on a it's built into a hill. So further back is actually up higher, but the height ranges, from, it's like 48 feet to 53 feet. I think that's exclusive. That doesn't include the towers. And so, the height of a parking deck between levels can be as low as 7 or 8 feet. And depending on the slope and the size, it can vary. So there's never a constant height. Usually longitudinally, it's always sloping. So the lower end actually here might be as low as like 45 feet, and then it's 48 feet up on the back end, because of the difference in height for the pitch. So, usually there's not really depending on if it's a level here, might be a slight cross pitch, but, we would say the height is measured across these, this wall. So in the zoning overlay, we're saying 40 feet is the height to here. So, any wall or screening or railing has to be 40 feet or less. So that's how we measure height on with the overlay.
All right. So why don't you go ahead and go into the specifics of the proposal?
Sure, thanks. So as I mentioned, it's a let me just see if I want to minimize that. Is that still legible to be able to see everything? Yep. So it's this would be an overlay in Article 3 of the zoning bylaw. So it'd have, a purpose section to allow for a public or private parking facility in the town center. It would apply only to this property. So, whether or not someone would want a parking garage on another lot, this overlay is really only specific to this property at North Prospect Street. And so the setbacks and some of the standards and conditions, might be adapted to another lot, but really this was written specific to this single property. And it says that the provisions of this section shall only apply to uses authorized below, so only a parking facility. The requirements of the underlying zoning, so the general residence, applies to all other uses. And unless specifically replaced or modified, sections of Article 6, 7, and 8 still apply to a parking facility. So the standards for signs, parking design and everything would still apply to this parking facility using this overlay, unless it's mentioned specifically in the zoning here. So, as I said, the allowed uses, 2 uses, section 3.3840 and 3.3841. So it's a public parking lot or garage, or a commercial parking lot or garage. The dimensional standards are something that, would replace table 3. So there's no lot frontage or lot area requirement. The frontage zone, so it would mimic what's currently there, 15 feet between the property line and the right-of-way line. The side and rear setbacks, it's 5 feet from an abutting property in a residential use in a residential district. Otherwise, there's no setback. So currently, there's no residential use in a residential district abutting this, so there isn't a setback required. The maximum building coverage could be 90%. The maximum lot coverage is 95%. So it would still be less lot coverage than there is now, at most. That's including a parking facility, walkways, entry drive. And the maximum height is 40 feet, and that's measured to the, average finished grade, which is taken from the current height definition in the bylaw, to the highest point of the parking structure, including any wall or screening or vertical element. It does exclude the stair or elevator enclosure and mechanical equipment, including solar panels. Typically, even in the zoning bylaw, we don't include, this mechanical equipment in the height definition and calculation. And then there's a number of standards and conditions. And so, we're saying this is allowed by site plan review. So it'd be now it'd be the planning board would apply, would be required to apply the design review principles and standards, landscape standards, and site plan review criteria. And there's always the ability through 11.24 to ask for an advisory opinion from the design review board. So although it's not mandatory to go to the design review board, that's always a possibility to refer it during permitting. So we're not in this zoning overlay. There's some parts that zoning doesn't get into in terms of absolute number of parking spaces, or a very detailed prescription of certain things. But what we are saying is that the maximum number of parking spaces would need to be approved after analysis of current and future traffic conditions. And it says a thorough evaluation provided by the applicant's professional designer, subject to peer review at the cost of the applicant, providing traffic analysis, parking impacts. And so this first bullet is really helping provide guidance to both the applicant and the permit granting authority about how to review a parking facility. The parking structure shall be designed to be compatible with the adjacent neighborhood and downtown. And so we have a condition that is somewhat subjective, but it allows the permit granting authority to use the design review principles, to use the standards and conditions in the bylaw to look at the design of the structure. The next bullet says the parking structure shall be designed and/or facade treatments shall be applied to minimize visibility of cars parked inside the facility. And so, there's different ways to handle this. Some have, a facade treatment that may look like a building with, window fenestrations or other architectural details. Some could be, artistic screening or different materials that screen the car. So, we're not trying to prescribe exactly what the architecture will look like, but we're asking that there be treatment to minimize cars inside. And this is both for, anywhere along North Prospect Street. So that's coming, from the north or coming from the south. So really, any time that there could be, the structure could be visible along North Prospect Street, we're asking that cars inside be screened. And this will also help with headlight glare too. So if there's some type of screening, it can help with minimizing light diffusion onto properties. We also require that architectural details and materials be used to break down the scale of the parking structure facade. And so again, without being overly prescriptive, we're expecting that the applicant would show either, change in materials, change in planes, columns, different architectural elements that would reduce the mass and monolithic scale of, just a flat facade. And so this is something that would be reviewed during permitting, and the applicant would have to show how they're reducing that mass and scale of the building. We do provide a few conditions in terms of the entry drive to the facility. And some of it is to try to keep the width to a map, without having it be too wide. So, we're saying that a minimum of 12 feet wide for one-way use, 18 for two-way, and a maximum of 24 feet wide at the street line. We're saying that it should be designed to minimize curb cuts and access over sidewalks, and at least one vehicle could be able to queue on property without blocking the sidewalk. And so, we can't prevent that, but, if it's the facility step back enough that at least there can be one car waiting to enter the facility if it's an entry off North Prospect Street without blocking the sidewalk. We're also saying sustainable design objectives shall be incorporated into the design of the parking facility. And so, this is something that through permitting would be looked at, is that, how it's operated, the materials, how it's designed, rainwater management. So what are those objectives? And it's something that the permit granting authority would have the ability to ask and to discuss during permitting. In the frontage zone, so in the first 15 feet, we're saying it needs to be landscaped with plants having a height of at least 1 story at time of planting. And so those are not, those are pretty substantial plantings. And the idea here is that, that's already screening, a third or so of the facade. So, we're saying that these plantings have to be pretty mature and will grow even taller so that they're pretty big plants. Continuous sidewalks and walkways need to be provided from the facility to adjacent properties and to the sidewalk on North Prospect Street. So, we're really thinking about connectivity here, pedestrian connectivity, or for cyclists, so that there has to be some walkways provided. Lighting needs to be installed and shielded to prevent light disbursement. And then we have our other lighting requirements being dark sky compliant. So all those other standards in the bylaw would apply. In terms of signs, the one thing we have here is an additional freestanding or projecting sign. We say sign, so it could be one or more that do not exceed a combined total of 100 square feet in area may be provided in accordance with other standards of Article 8. And so, and any other signs would have to comply with Article 8. And so, the idea here is there may need to be a banner or banners on the, on the facility or not, directing traffic, where's the entry, where's the exit. And so, Northampton's garage has those, a number of garages have a larger sign than permitted. So currently in the RG, it's like 12 square feet. So there's not a very big sign is allowed in the RG district. So we're allowing for bigger signs to help direct traffic and wayfinding. And then, we're requiring a parking management, operations and maintenance plan be submitted at time of application. And, we list a number of things we want to see in this plan. It's not, an exhaustive list, but it's a number of things in terms of parking spaces and how many are available to different users, the public, long-term users, businesses, and permit holders. Parking rates and fees, hours of operation, safety measures such as lighting, security cameras, signage, or call box, enforcement operations, including ticketing, trash storage and removal, snow management, the treatment and maintenance of interior surfaces, and then rainwater management. And some of these pieces in the management plan may also be aspects that are more defined in a request for proposals that the town would issue in terms of how many public spaces or short-term spaces should be available to patrons and the public. And maybe we have some other conditions in terms of hours of operation, but that's something that we wouldn't want to restrict in zoning or have something. It's really an applicant would propose it. And so that's the overlay district in a nutshell.
So is this the text that would be recommended straight to town council if we endorse this?
It would. I noticed that the sustainable development principle should have its separate bullet in the standards and conditions. I think that that was lost in, I have a Mac. I think when I converted to PDF, that formatting changed. But yeah, so this is the language of the proposed amendment.
All right, great. I'm seeing Chris's hand.
So I just wanted to mention that I think we need to put this into a format that fits into our bylaw. And I'm not sure that this is in the exact format that would have to go into the bylaw. The words are correct, but the format may need to be tweaked. We probably need to put a number on it. In other words, this has to look, once it gets to town council, it has to look exactly, it's supposed to look exactly like it will look when it goes into the bylaw.
Right. So we'd have to assign a section number and then subsection numbers to each of these, the applicability, allowed uses, and then instead of bullets, it might be, might be numbers. But yeah, the text wouldn't change necessarily, but the formatting would.
Okay, thank you. Andrew.
Thanks, Doug. Thanks for the presentation. very thorough, which is great. That was really good to see the details. One thing I just circle back on Jack's question earlier on was in the agenda, it mentions that we would be extending BG into the vacant parcel, but that's not what's being proposed, just to confirm. So it would stay RG.
That's correct.
Cool. The height from so in the proposal, it's 40 feet maximum from North Prospect. I know there's a change of grade on that lot. Do you have a sense of what that is? And if we did go at the 40 feet, how tall it would be as you approach North Pleasant Street?
Nate, you want to answer
Sure.
that?
Yeah, I mean, I think that, so there's, it's a number of feet over the site, and then, North Pleasant Street is further downhill. So, it's also behind an existing building. So right now, if that were, a straight 40 feet built behind the existing building, I'm not sure it would be visible from North Pleasant Street.
Yeah, I don't know if it would be or not. I guess I'd be curious to see. It's not a, it's not a, I guess just something to consider, right? If it's
Right.
open parking up top and you walk down Main Street and you can see, cars essentially on the roof behind a building.
Right.
And then also just one, I'm not sure if I followed completely on the signage. You mentioned the 100 square feet. That would be 100 square feet that would go onto the garage facade, or that would be like freestanding signage on the property. What do you envision that to be?
Yeah, I think the bylaw doesn't, it allows any of those, right? A combination of projecting signs or freestanding signs. They couldn't be backlit or LED or, a scrolling sign. So it's still have to follow conditions in the zoning bylaw, except for the size, right? So right now, only 12 square feet is allowed for signs. So, say 2 feet by 6 feet. We're saying that there could be an additional 100 square feet, up to 100. It doesn't have to be that big. But an applicant could propose to have different signs on the property. So it could be that, some garages above the entry and exit will have, pretty big lettering saying entry or exit, right? Just like relief letters or something. And so that's considered a sign. And so to be able to be visible from the street, we've allowed, that big of a square foot allowance. So, I was envisioning, it could even be, if we think that they're entering from North Prospect Street, there could be something on the south facade or a freestanding sign that has something about like parking facility entrance. I don't know the size, but it just would have to be bigger than 12 square feet to be visible. And so.
Okay, yeah, that helps. I would suggest that so the 100 in total seems all right. I would suggest that we would maybe still put sort of a cap on individual signs. I think North Prospect, I don't think anybody's going to just accidentally go down North Prospect and stumble upon it where they'd need to see the sign. Yeah, another thought there.
Yep.
And then also, and I think this goes beyond the scope, but just before I forget, would be, as we envision this particular overlay, have we considered making North Prospect be open to two-way traffic? Because to me, as I was thinking through like how you would go about accessing this, if the only access is from North Prospect, I live in South Amherst, so it's fine. Like I can drive through town. If I don't find a spot, I could just turn on North Prospect and loop around. But if you're coming from the north and you drive past it, then you've got to do like a fair amount of navigating to like U-turn your way back, go back through town and access it. It seems like for this thing to be effective, that would need to be two-way traffic, in which case you'd need to address like the on-street parking. So I think that's, maybe beyond the scope of what you're talking about, or certainly what we've talked about, but I think it is something that we should consider for this to be really viable, would be being open to the ability to make North Prospect be two-way.
Yeah, Doug, if I could, yeah, thanks, Andrew. Staff has said that may need to be a possibility, and so again, I guess it would be, if there was a proposal on the site, what the applicant was saying in terms of how the parking facility would be, how it could be accessed, and so really it would be up to an applicant, do they use the one-way entry from North Pleasant Street as it is, or would they have a different design configuration with an entry and exit solely from North Prospect Street? And then the applicant would propose, they'd have to engage Public Works and the planning board and have a traffic study saying why two-way traffic is needed and what that impact is. And so, yeah, I think that the overlay doesn't address that, but I think it's something that, we'd respond to if an applicant came forward with their proposal, in terms of how they want to enter and exit a facility.
Yeah, two-way makes the most sense, but I think to do it, you'd have to be taking off your on-street parking. So you're just kind of, shifting chairs around a little bit. But anyhow, thanks for the presentation.
Thanks, Andrew. I see a couple more hands from the board, but before we do that, I saw that Evan is still here. And Evan, since you've taken the time to join us this evening, did you want to say anything?
Sure. Excuse me if my internet gets choppy. The connection's not been great. So I'm mostly here just in case there are questions on sort of the non-zoning aspects. But I did just want to thank the planning department for their work on this. This started back in February 2020, I believe, when the town presented their destination Amherst plan to the council, which included a public-private partnership to build a parking structure at the site. And George and I were interested in seeing that move forward and brought the zoning amendment forward to create that opportunity. And what planning department has done is essentially expanded on that and created a much better proposal. And what makes it better is I think it's responsive to the concerns we heard from especially residents on North Prospect. And that's why George and I have rallied behind the proposal from planning department. Is we heard really legitimate concerns during the public hearing. And what we did is we came forward with a modified proposal that is directly responsive to the concerns the residents have. So I think from a process perspective, this has been good. We heard from the public, we heard concerns, and we made changes in response to those concerns. And I really just want to thank the planning department for the work they did in bringing forth a much more workable, a much more sensible proposal, and one that also takes into account all of the concerns we heard during the public hearings. So I'm here to answer questions if there are non-zoning questions. And otherwise, I'm just here to listen to your conversation.
Thanks, Evan. And your microphone is a problem. All right, Tom.
Thanks, Doug, and thanks, Nate, for the presentation. I was going to comment on something I think you just answered, but from my perspective, access from North Pleasant on the one-way seems super viable, and I just wanted to make sure that we would be able to maintain that pass-through from the CVS lot into this particular lot as a point of entry, because then you limit the traffic on North Prospect as just an outflow of traffic, and it could be a one-way helix-like experience that lets you out onto that other end. So I wanted to just make sure we still had access to that as the throughway for a single directional traffic flow. But I think that question was answered.
Yeah, I mean, I will say that sorry, Doug, I just jumped in here, but the entry drive that's there now is allowed through an easement. It's a perpetual easement on the property, so a 13-foot wide, public access to the back. So that's something that was granted, decades ago for both properties, right? So what was Lewis Foods and what's on the property now. So that's been in existence, and it will continue to be there. And then the access to the public, to the town-owned facility lot has been there as well for many decades. So that's something that could be considered depending on how the applicant wants to design a facility or the circulation.
Just so that 13-foot easement is from North Pleasant and
Right.
serves and is for the benefit of both the property where CVS is and the property where this parcel is.
Right. It's that, right.
Okay, great. Are there any other easements as part of this property?
Not that I looked through the registry quickly, and, so the CVS property is actually 5 properties under common ownership, and the municipal lot was part of that. So at one point it was 6 or 7 properties all under common ownership. It came to be in the late 50s. And then in the 60s, it was all a parking garage for the market along North Pleasant Street. And so it's been a parking lot since, the 1960s. And the town took the property, currently in 1989 for parking. And so, since the 80s, this has been a publicly available lot with access over the property. And so it's mentioned in the deed that, that there's the 13-foot wide strip is for access to the CVS lot and to the municipal lot, or to the tract 4 is what it's called. And so the deed, there's no easement per se, but it says for access for the public for parking.
Okay, thank you. All right, so we'll move on with the other raised hands from the board. Jack, you're first. Actually, before you start, Chris, do you need to interject something?
I just wanted to say that we've talked internally about the potential for having two-way on North Prospect Street from Amity Street into the entry to the new parking garage if it is built. And then having the remainder of North Prospect Street remain one way towards Amity Street. So that prevents a lot of traffic from going past people's houses. We haven't talked to the DPW about this, but internally in the planning department, that seems to make sense. So I just wanted to offer that as an alternative that is being considered. But of course, that wouldn't actually come about as part of this rezoning. That would only come about if someone proposes a parking garage in this location. Thank you.
And I assume there'd be some traffic studies to assess whether it's needed, and if it is needed, whether it's functional. Jack.
Yeah, actually, that Chris just kind of addressed what I was going to, say. It seems like just two-way up to like Cow's Lane, and then keeping the remainder of Prospect, one way seems like a great solution to the situation. Because I agree with Andrew that access and exit to that parking garage would be facilitated by 2 lanes, and I don't know, it doesn't look like a heck of a lot of impact would be made by removing the parking that is on North Prospect there, especially with Perry Apartments and et cetera. But it seems like those houses may need to get like a discount on a parking permit within the garage, or some accommodations if that happens. But my real question was going back to Andrew again. Geez, his comment from last week with regard to spot zoning, and I'm not that spot zoning means nothing to me, but it seems like a derogatory term. And is this overlay concept, would that be misconstrued as something that is spot zoning, because that again has some sort of negative connotation to it? But in this situation, obviously we need parking, and this seems like a great solution. Thank you, Nate, and your team for coming up with something that really seems innovative to solve this problem. So, but I was just wondering, going back to Andrew's thing, could this be criticized for this spot zoning? And what is spot zoning? I guess I'm asking the planning department what that means. And
all right, thanks, Jack. Nate,
Yeah.
you want to?
Yeah, so I
clarify?
think overview, I said as an overlay zone, it's not spot zoning because the underlying zoning is still in place. So the overlay only would apply if someone proposes to build a parking facility. And I think Massachusetts Smart Growth Toolkit, a number of agencies, even housing like Chapel, would say that an overlay is actually a great way to address a unique instance or opportunity, right? So 40Rs can be on one property, 43D expedited permitting can be on one property. And so it's actually, I think it's an appropriate use of an overlay here. It actually can address many of the concerns, as opposed to, if we were changing this zoning to something so spot zoning would be if, even BG, if right now BG abuts its property. And so there's concerns about, say, changing the underlying zoning. And staff wasn't concerned that that was spot zoning because it's adjacent to properties that have the zoning. The concern with BG is that the height, the massing, the allowed uses, may not be appropriate. And so that's why an overlay was considered. Spot zoning, you could consider it, it's something that's zoned in isolation from what other allowed uses or compatible uses are. So, putting, an industrial zone in the middle of, say, a residential neighborhood. And so, what we're proposing here is allowing, a parking facility that would actually be compatible with and complement the surrounding uses. So it's, and as an overlay, it wouldn't really be considered spot zoning.
Great, thank you. Thank you, Nate.
I think Rob might have a better.
I'm sorry?
Rob raised his hand. He might want to address the spot zoning issue as well.
Oh yeah, Rob?
Yeah, I just wanted to add to what Nate said, and hopefully not, have to continue the discussion about spot zoning, because we're certain the overlay does not constitute spot zoning, and that's what we've transitioned to here. But two important factors that are looked at when considering spot zoning are whether or not there's a public good and whether or not there's a significant financial benefit to a single property owner. So, just more to answer Jack's question, just, larger picture on spot zoning, which isn't really the issue here, but those are two really important factors that are looked at in when a court is trying to decide on a case related to spot zoning. In my research, there wasn't a single case where spot zoning on an overlay, even on a single parcel, had ever been has ever occurred. And in a quick opportunity to talk about that with our town attorney, he did confirm that for me recently.
Great, thank you,
Thanks.
Rob. All right, Janet, you are still muted.
So I'm hoping, Doug, that can we just focus the discussion on access, like car, truck, and pedestrian access? Like, because sometimes we sort of jump around from topic to topic. And
Well,
so
I frankly think that the access is something that would come out of any proposals that people made. And right now we're focused on the proposal for the overlay on that specific parcel.
okay, so but just anyways, just my hope that we can focus on those just thing. So can we have the screen which shows the lot with the parking garage, like the superimposed Greenfield parking garage on the lot?
Is that visible?
That's pretty visible. So Nate, I have a few questions. One of them is there an easement that allows the cars on the town lot to exit on North Prospect Street, or do the cars just do that?
So currently, here, let me just scroll down. The lot itself, is this trapezoidal shape with frontage on North Prospect Street. So if, with the overlay, there would just be a curb cut made to enter onto the property. There's no easement necessary. They would just enter and exit from North Prospect Street, say, into a parking facility or parking lot. So there's no easement or access easement needed for that.
So, but currently, we, obviously all these cars are using the town lot, they're crossing onto CVS land and exiting. So there's no easement that protects our right to do that, or?
It's written into the deed, so the 13-foot wide easement, if everyone can see my cursor, is here. And it comes in here, and it's to the benefit of the public and vehicular access to, it says, for this lot and this lot. So,
okay, so there is no easement on the North Prospect Street, but you're saying that it's just something that we all do, and that in order to get access to the parking garage, curb cuts could be made just directly off of North Prospect Street. Okay, that helps. I kind of, what this goes to the issue of like zero side and rear setbacks. Say the parking garage was built right to the property line. I was concerned about people walking out of CVS the CVS cars parking along on the, let me see, the south side, which is hard to see from this picture. And then trucks coming in to the CVS lot to unload, and cars coming in to the CVS lot just to use the space, and and perhaps going to the parking garage. It just seemed like a lot of pressure to put on a smallish area, and it could be dangerous to pedestrians, drivers, or the trucks really can't have access back and forth. And so I had concerns about that, and I had a lot of concerns about the 0 setbacks, side and rear setbacks, because I think that's no gift to the adjacent landowners. It really constrains how they can use the site. And then what they would like to build on the site or use their site when there's just a building right on the property line. And I speak from deep personal experience because I own a house that is with a building on the property line, and it actually has done a lot of constraints in how I can develop that site. And if there was a building right up to the property line and the town wanted to repair siding or the sides of that on the outside, they would have to literally be on somebody else's property. So I would argue very strongly that there has to be some sort of side and rear setbacks, just out of fairness to adjacent property owners. And so the town isn't imposing their building and, restricting their use, the adjacent owner's use. So I thought that was a big issue to me, sort of a red flag. I was a little worried about the setback. I was a little confused about 0 frontage and then the frontage zone, where it just seemed to make sense just to have 15 or 20 feet of frontage. I didn't understand the distinction between those two terms.
Well, the minimum frontage was the standard requirement for a particular lot to have a certain amount of linear street frontage on the street. But since this is an overlay, I think he just put in 0. And similarly for the minimum lot size. Is that true, Nathan?
Right. And so the frontage is really right, as Doug said, the linear dimension,
Okay.
from left to right, or whatever you want to say, across the curb street. And then the frontage zone is the setback from property line to a facility or parking lot.
So the frontage zone is really a front setback. Is that right?
Yes.
Okay, that was a little confusing to me. And the current one right now, yours is like 20 or 20 feet.
Mhm.
I also thought that North Prospect Street, there are a lot of people who live along there. I went and visited today, and a lot of the houses are multifamily houses. And I thought that we should put in design guidelines that basically say that the parking garage, that no cars it just be a solid wall. And I pictured people coming out of the Drake or the bars at night at 12 or 1 in the morning, feeling very happy, slamming doors, beeping, their cars beeping, maybe setting off an alarm, maybe people talking or shouting. And all the lights of cars starting up. And I just thought, I've been in a lot of parking garages that have a solid wall. And I think that would be really a kindness to those people to basically shield them from all that kind of activity and sound. And then also that facade should fit in with 19th century homes, and not just be the very unattractive Greenfield parking garage facade. And I've seen parking garages in cities that you really can't even tell is a parking garage. Like you have to do like 3 double takes until you realize, oh, this is a building for cars. And so I think that the design guideline section is aspirational, but the design review board guidelines, we've ignored them before. We've ignored the design review board on many occasions. And so I think let's put some this is an overlay. Let's put in some very specific requirements that protect those property owners and renters from, the negative impacts of this garage. And not just hope that a future planning board will impose requirements that we just haven't been imposing for, years, it seems, at least the last 2 projects.
Thank you, Janet.
So I think quickly, Doug, the overlay says that the permit granting authority shall apply the requirements of the design review principles and standards. So it can't be ignored or overlooked. It really has to be applied. And the thought is with some of the other standards and conditions, it's really then a discussion between the planning board and applicant, what is compatible and what does work. So, a modern structure can be compatible with, 19th century architecture. So we're not trying to say that it has to be a certain material or architectural style, because I think that, that's open for a discussion during permitting, because I think a number of materials and styles can be compatible. And so I think by stating that the requirements of 3.204, section 7.1 design standards and landscape standards, and 11.24, we're saying that all those have to be applied during permitting and reviewed. So it's not, the permit granting authority would have to walk through all of those criteria and discuss those with an applicant. So, staff thinks that's a pretty good safeguard in terms of making sure things are compatible. Now, Jen, I heard you about the setbacks, and so again, setbacks are, that's allowed. That's a maximum build out, and it's also allowing flexibility for an applicant. And so, it's really then, again, through permitting, what is the shape and the design of the site. And so, we're expecting that there needs to be pedestrian connections to adjacent properties to the sidewalk. And so, the overlay is allowing enough flexibility for the possibility of a parking facility and also all these other pieces of it. And so, without saying exactly where a parking facility could be located on a property or where a pathway could be located, we're providing, actually a building and lot coverage that would be less than lot coverage than is less now. So, we think that's sufficient to allow for all these things to happen on the property.
Thank you, Nate. Maria?
Sorry, I got last screen's open. Thanks, Nate, for that presentation. I really appreciate you going to this level of detail, although I'll stand behind my previous thoughts that, I really feel like we're getting into the weeds. This is, like you said, trying to provide a very flexible sort of pathway to a parking facility that, a team like of engineers, architects, surveyors will all sort of come and study and do all of this and answer a lot of questions. And I appreciate you, writing in a lot of specifics that you want, as well as leaving a lot of flexibility. I think that, giving as much of the lot as possible to the structure makes a lot of sense. I don't think this is the time to start adding more setbacks. What's adjacent is the backs of a lot of adjacent parcels. So it's not like you're on Main Street, facing a lot of pedestrians. This is something where we really want to optimize this particular use, the parking deck. So I think that's great. This overlay idea is brilliant. Whoever in the planning department, building department, sort of all working together to come up with it, because there's just zero risk. There's no more risk of, what people are worried about if we had changed the zoning. So I really hope this moves forward, because, obviously we've heard there's a big need for it, and the solution is a very safe path, I think. I honestly didn't see anything that sort of was a red flag to me at this point. And so I feel like, if you just sort of reformat it to the zoning bylaw format, I guess we could maybe whenever this comes up to the next planning board meeting, we could send it back to town council, or I think that's the next step. But I feel like the way you sort of created this is just, there's just very low risk of anything happening other than exactly what it is you're asking for. And I can't believe how much detail you put into these standard conditions, but I think that will sort of calm a lot of the worries that have come up to you. So to get this to move forward. So you did what you had to do, and I hope that this, moves forward and you can put your energies and expertise to all the many more zoning amendments we want to accomplish. So thanks again for all this great work.
Chris, were you expecting that we would were you thinking this would be something we might approve this evening, or did you intend that we would wait until it's formatted at another meeting?
I think you need to wait until it's formatted, but you can give us your blessing to move forward with it. I think that's what we're really looking for, because this is the first time you've seen this. And so we wanted to get some sense that this is something that you're interested in. And then we can bring it back on October 20th in a format that could be presented to town council.
Thank you.
And you could vote on it that night.
Okay. Maria, your hand is still up. Andrew.
Thanks, Doug. So I think that makes sense in terms of providing some support and getting it back. I would like to be able to sort of have a closer read on it. And I do think, excuse me, just my point earlier, I would like to see some sort of cap, like maybe it's 100 feet in total, but let's just make sure we don't, developer doesn't put a 10 by 10 sign on the back of that building right in front of those residents, because it seems like an easy way to piss someone off without really actually gaining much. This is just like a more of a technical question relative to Janet's on the zero setback. I just don't know exactly how that works. So like if a developer came in and tried to like build that exact Greenfield lot and they're right up on the zero lot line there, what sort of rights would they have to access like the St. Bridget's parking lot if they needed to do work? I'm a parishioner there. I know that people park in that lot for Saturday services. Like, just how does it work in the town? Like, if somebody needed to get some service equipment on there, could they just squat in the St. Bridget's parking lot set up some scaffolding and like some restrictions on how they can do that?
I think they would need to obtain permission and have a full agreement, especially concerning liability. Nate, how would you answer that?
Sorry, yeah, thanks, Doug. I was muted. I was going to answer it that way too. And I think then it's, it would be incumbent on the applicant to enter into those agreements, prior to construction. It's also then, with the zero setback, there's possibilities of maybe different material and building code, just so that there is reduced maintenance, right? So there is the ability to access it maybe from above or something. So I think that, a zero setback, although it allows for flexibility, right, there are more considerations in terms of how you'd actually develop that and maintain that. So, we're not proposing, that's really then the applicant or the owner or adjacent neighbors how to work with that.
Sounds good. Thank you.
Thank you. Let's see. Before we go to you a second time, I'm going to just ask a couple questions. The reference to the heavily landscaped area in the frontage zone with plants having a height of at least 1 story. Do you interpret that as not allowing any plants that are less than 1 story?
Well, now that you ask, I would say yes, but that wasn't necessarily the intention. And so, it's really, to have some substantial plantings at the time of, construction or.
Yeah, I mean, I guess it seems to me you probably want to have a landscaped buffer zone that provides substantial visual screening of the structure, at least to the height of the 2nd story or something like that.
Right. Yeah. So that the way you worded it could be, it could be modified to say that.
Yeah. Okay. So then the second question I had to do with the continuous sidewalks or walkways provided to key areas served. You're not expecting anybody to build sidewalks off of this property, right? I mean, they're not going to do a sidewalk from this property to the library, for instance.
No, that's not a requirement. No.
Okay.
But, for instance, if there's an entry and exit off North Prospect Street and they have a side, then we're proposing that, they have a connection from their entry and exit to the sidewalk on North Prospect, and possibly, another sidewalk that may be then directing them to the CVS lot, if that's, how they want people to walk as well. So, right, they wouldn't carry the sidewalks off property.
Okay, all right. All right, that's all I had. Janet?
So just to circle back to my comments, there is no zoning district in the bylaw that doesn't have a side or rear setback less than 10 feet. And so I don't really understand what is the problem with having a building with side and rear setbacks. Not having a zero setback clearly gives them maximum flexibility. We just don't give it to anybody else. And so I don't know why you're putting this kind of burden on the, like, how are they going to build this building without being all over St. Bridges or CVS? And after they build it, how are they going to repair it? And then what happens to CVS if they decide they don't want to use their parking lot, they can use the one next door, and they want to build a building, and there's a building right up the side. I can tell you what happens is that you all run into all sorts of problems with building codes and access and things like that. And so I just think it's sort of odd that, so anyway, I don't know why the planning board members are arguing against rear and side setbacks. It's in our code. We need to apply it uniformly. And there are good reasons for it. And I don't see the reasons not to have that. But getting back to the CVS lot is, if you built a building up to that lot line, trucks would have trouble getting in there. People would have trouble walking to the cars. Cars would have trouble coming into that lot. If all those three things were happening at once, that just, it's going to be sort of a disaster. And so I think we have to think about, with courtesy and thought, with the adjacent property owners, not just the people on North Prospect Street, but definitely the people on North Prospect Street, the CVS company, and then also St. Bridges Church. I don't know what the reason is to impose onto these different adjacent landowners, other than to give maximum flexibility to this facility. What about giving some flexibility to the adjacent property owners? I do like this proposal. I think it actually is a really good, strong start. I think it needs a lot of refinement, in terms of the green barrier on North Prospect Street. I would say make them evergreens, so people aren't looking, and there is a beautiful evergreen barrier there right now. So I would, make it year round, not just seasonal. So I wonder if the planning staff could address the concerns about how a build out right up to the edge in the rear and the side would affect the use of the CVS lot for users of that lot, including trucks, cars, people parking, and people walking out of there.
Yeah, thanks, Janet. So in terms of that and the Evergreen Plantings, my thought is that becomes a discussion during permitting when there's a proposal. So, we're not prescribing Evergreen Plantings because it could be a mix of deciduous and evergreen, right? I mean, there can be, so, staff's thought is that what you're asking are great questions that would be asked of an applicant. And so not necessarily sorted out right now. So the zero setback, the reason we have it is it's unique to this property as an overlay. And so it can be unique, and it doesn't have to conform with the other zoning districts. That's why we're proposing an overlay with its own dimensional standards to allow for a parking facility.
Sorry,
so I think that
there are reasons for setback.
Janet, please hold.
So my thought is that if there is a proposal and there is no setback, then that becomes a discussion as to what can there be done to accommodate traffic. But at this time, we can't envision what a proposal may be. So the thought is an applicant would be considerate of how is their access if there is this 13-foot wide easement. And so, we're allowing someone to build up to that corner. It doesn't mean that they have to. It means that they have that potential. And so it's really an applicant's decision on how they want to design a structure at that junction of those properties. And so, I feel like they're, to have a setback in case of to not allow that is something that I think the planning board could discuss during permitting.
All right, thanks, Nate. Johanna?
Thank you so much. I have a couple of thoughts. My first thought is, if we continue this hearing, which it sounds like we will, would it actually be possible to change the name of the hearing so we're not talking about extending the general business district to the vacant parcel, but instead clarifying what it is, which is an overlay district, just for public transparency, and so that the public knows what we're currently considering. That's one question, whether that's doable, or perhaps once a hearing is started, it just has to have the same name. My second question has to do with that 13th. And again, it might be that now is not the right time, in which case Nate or Chris or Doug just tell me it's not the right time. But I feel like a couple of months ago when we were talking about the zoning downtown, we talked about wanting to move into a direction where we're reducing sidewalk cuts and improving the walkability and the safety for pedestrians on Pleasant Street. And to me, that like cars ducking in behind CVS is that's a spot where people get worried about their pedestrian safety. And so I don't know, again, might be that we need to talk about it later. And I guess CVS for now continues to have access there, but it seems like getting to a place where we're moving increasing the walkability on the front, moving in a direction of reducing that sidewalk cut and having the cars be on North Prospect would be desirable for a downtown walkability standpoint. And maybe that easeway becomes a pedestrian passageway rather than a vehicular passageway. And then I think those are my only questions right now.
Okay, good thoughts. Chris, I see your hand. You want to interject here?
Yep, thanks. I just wanted to point out that there are two places in the bylaw where we do have zero setback. And it's not clear from table 3, but if you look in the text of Article 6, you'll see that the minimum side yard setback and the minimum rear yard setback in some zoning districts, including general business, have to be a certain distance if they're abutting a residence district, but otherwise side yards and rear yards are not required at all. So, but if they are provided, they need to be 10 feet. And we've dealt with this on projects such as Spring Street, where they got a special permit to deviate from 0 feet or 10 feet, because those were the two choices. And I think their setback is 1 foot or something like that. So I just wanted to point out that we do have these cases where 0 foot setback for both side and rear yard is allowed. Thank you.
Thank you, Chris. Johanna, your hand is still up. I'll assume that's a legacy. And Jack.
Thanks, Doug. I just wanted to, in terms of the information we have gotten in emails and things like that, Janet forwarded us this Amherst parking facility studies, dated 1990. I don't know how relevant that is, but I was wondering if Janet wanted to point something out from that, or I had 75 pages. I'm not going to read it, but I just was wondering what Janet's if you wanted to say something that, a minute or two.
All right, Janet. Thanks, Jack.
So I was just responding to, that site, the CVS lot site was selected as like the top site amongst the 3 sites. One of them was the Bank Center lot. The other one was Amity Street, although they were sort of close to each other. Like it wasn't like an outstanding competition, CVS lot 1. But when they were considering what could be built on there, and that report really delves into the CVS lot site, it was talking about the whole lot, including the CVS spaces. And so when Nate was saying, oh, this was the preferred choice was the entire lot, not just part of it. And so that actually got me thinking about how will that CVS lot function with the building right there? And so I just wanted to be clear that we're looking at a smaller version of the lot. And obviously a smaller, building and things like that. So I wonder, can I segue into another issue, Doug, or do you want to go to public comment and we can come back
Well, I wanted to make one comment about something you just said, which was, if this moves forward, would there be any opportunity for the CVS lot owner to partner with the public, with the developer for the parking lot and come back with a parking garage that spans that and extends into the CVS lot area. Nate?
I'm not sure.
Because we're not changing the zoning in the CVS lot.
Right. I think, there could be some pre-existing non-conformings that may be applied. But, interesting question. I don't know if Rob or Chris has an idea there. I think, on the face of it, I'd say it'd be difficult, but you'd have to kind of see what a proposal looks like in terms of what is it the building overhanging a little bit, or is it actually a parking garage that encompasses both properties?
Yeah, well, I mean, it sounds like from this study that Janet was talking about, it actually did encompass both properties.
Mhm.
Rob, did you want to comment on that?
Just to add that it could occur, but it would be very limiting by lot and building coverages, which was really what was the original issue of looking at this lot for a building with a pre-existing non-conforming lot. It doesn't benefit from any non-conforming building coverage. So it is subject to the limit in the table for the RG district, and it would be in that case, unless the zoning changed or overlay was expanded.
Okay, thank you. Janet, I did sort of interrupt you there. Did you want to say anything else?
Well, I'm always interested in your questions, Doug, because they always lead to more thinking. And so just maybe so the CVS lot is RG. I thought it was BG for some reason. No, it's RG. So that got me thinking. So if we did an overlay district, it could be larger or it could be somewhere else, which I think Nate said we could put down 1 or 2 overlay districts and let developers decide where they want to build something, I guess. But if we did the overlay here, we could extend it, which would give some flexibility for the CVS lot, I suppose. Is that correct?
Nate?
Sorry, I was muted. That is correct. I think, though, I'm not sure the property owners, necessarily want a parking facility there. So, we're choosing a municipally owned lot because that's something that is under town control, and we can apply it to this lot.
Okay, thank you. Andrew, I see you, but I'm going to ask Chris what she'd like to say first.
I just wanted to say that the owners of the CVS lot have been reluctant in the past to engage in conversation about anything that might happen on their parking lot. However, their situation may be changing. They're elderly, they have a representative who lives locally, and as far as I know, no one on the town side or the bid has spoken with her or with the owners. And so there may be, an opportunity to consider what Janet was talking about, which is to have an overlay zone that would go over that property as well. But that hasn't been a conversation that we have had recently. And the other thing is that the owners of the CVS lot are committed to a lease with CVS, which includes parking. And so I know that they would be reluctant to do anything that would disrupt the situation that CVS has now. So I think it would be complicated, but it's probably not impossible. But as far as I know, no one has engaged them in conversation. And since I think this was taken on by George and Evan as kind of a first step. And perhaps if this first step were to be achieved, then it would make sense for someone to engage in the conversation with the owners of the lot that includes the CVS store. Thanks.
Great, thank you, Chris. And Janet.
So nobody's contacted St. Bridget's or the CVS build lot owners about this proposal? That seems like a kind of a huge omission. I wonder if we could do that.
You mean in terms of notifying the abutters of a conversation going on?
will be possibly a rezoning that would affect them. They might have some points of view.
Okay, Chris?
Yeah, so there's no requirement for us to send abutters notices to abutters for a rezoning. And there's been discussion about this in the past, like, should we do this? And since I think if this had been a zoning amendment that originated in the planning department or with the planning board, we probably would have done that because we would have felt ownership of this proposal. Right now, we're kind of accepting some ownership of it as a result of this change that we're proposing, but we didn't start out with it. So all of the probably courtesies that we may have offered didn't come to pass because we were not the owners of this. So we're proposing an alternative solution here. And it may make sense to talk to the owners of CVS and St. Bridget's, but again, we didn't feel like it was our proposal to really take that step. So.
All right. Thank you. Andrew.
Thanks, Doug. Yeah, I think it's would be a good courtesy. I know that St. Bridget's makes heavy use of that lot on Sundays, and they have sort of their pass through from that lot to their property. So to the extent that that's changing, I think it'd probably be useful to let folks know at least that it could change, right? Obviously, as we mentioned before, we would need someone to build it, but I think that would be a nice courtesy to extend. Thanks.
Thanks, Andrew. Janet, I assume your hand is a legacy? Okay. All right, any more comments from the board? All right, I see 2 hands in the attendance. Let's go with Ronnie Parker first. Pam?
Yes, I'm with you. I'm here.
And if you could start the clock at 0.
I will do that.
Okay, this is Ronnie Parker. I'm sort of in day 2 of my home on North Prospect Street. And we are not directly across from this overlay that you mentioned. I think, so that's one of my questions, because we are sort of at the corner, at the place when people come out of this current CVS exit, they turn left, and that light, the turn, reflects entirely on our house in ways that I'm shocked. I obviously didn't sleep here before we bought the house, but I'm really surprised at the extent to which that light comes around at us. So first, if this new overlay, I actually should start that I'm so impressed that the city listened to all the people who came and spoke and really tried to do something different. I really am. And so we're not directly across. And then there was this thing about how the entry and exit would abut directly. And on the PowerPoint, you drew this line right across the middle of the new proposed lot. So my question is, what happens to the existing entry and exit? Does that still operate on its own? And will the people using the garage will have their own entry and exit? And then how is that managed with signs and traffic going one way or two way? All that's very confusing to me. And I think really does need just a little more work and clarity. But I did want to express my opinion that the 2-story green is really important because it is very difficult to imagine the impact of the light and the glare. And again, in your requirements, you said that it will be screened for lights and glare, which sounds great. That's like, we have a solution for polio or whatever, but the real question is, what is that? So I would like to understand more about what that screening requirement is. And I assume in your RFP, you won't just say screen for light and glare, there'll be some kind of standard. So I would really be happy, to tell you the truth, to come and talk to the appropriate person now that I'm here physically in the town government. So I don't I don't feel like I have to say so much at every meeting, and that I can be more concise. But I want assurance. And I know you keep saying, well, that's up to the applicant. Well, you know, let me give you an example. You said, oh, you can have a facade that is consistent with the historic nature of the homes across the street. Well, but what if none of your bidders, let's say you have 4 bidders and none of them really have anything that is, you know, they have something that's unsatisfactory. Would you not do the project and say, we are rebidding, we want somebody who really addresses this criterion? Or will you say, well, look, you know, we're lucky we got 4 bids. This one is a good price for us. And somebody said at a previous meeting, it doesn't cost the town a thing.
All right,
Well,
Ronnie, your time
The
is up.
cost to the town has to do, with us who live around it. So I think all this, I just have these questions, but I have to tell you, I know my time is up. I have to tell you that I'm really impressed by the responsiveness to the comments, and I'm willing to engage some more and not be disruptive if I can have some answers and speak within my time. So I appreciate the time to speak. Thank you.
Thank you, Ronnie. Next comment is from Pam Rooney. State your name and address.
Hi, Pam.
Hi there, Pam Rooney, 42 Cottage Street. Thanks. The previous speaker had made some really good points. I think we're obviously in the details, we're in the weeds, but unfortunately in this case, the weeds are what make a project sort of viable or not, especially for the neighbors. The cost saving, the facade that the previous speaker just talked about is a pretty important one. The example of Greenfield in their cost saving effort eliminated the texture and scale and the fun details that were clearly going to be part of the project to dress it up. They got eliminated. So the reality is that we truly need more control over writing in some of that character and scale. A true description of several proposals for how the flow of traffic will occur, the pedestrian traffic, the vehicular traffic is really important, because I think people really need to grapple with what would be functional and what would not, in fact, disrupt that neighbor with the lights shining on them every single time. Having a duplicate exit drive for the CDS and for the garage greatly diminishes the ability of anything to be screened from that neighborhood and from the sidewalk. So you're multiplying the open space between and the visibility of this structure. Side easements. Most of you may not know, but if you have angled parking, you actually can have 55-foot lanes instead of 60-foot lanes. Therefore, you have a 110-foot wide building plus the wall widths. Maybe there is some opportunity to squeeze that down a little and force people to use their compact cars, but give a little bit of more lenience to the St. Bridget's side of things for access and for St. Bridget's patrons who need that respect. I was curious about the comment about the builder would have the opportunity to do long-term permit holders or short-term, i.e. public holders. I think the only reason we're doing this project is because theoretically we're a destination town and therefore we need lots and lots of public parking. So to see a proposal that comes in with minimized public parking, I think is not constructive. Let's see, any other comments? Oh yeah, the fact that we rely heavily on the design review board criteria and all of the sections of the planning in the bylaws, those have been ignored time after time by the planning board in the review of previous buildings, and therefore I, as a occupant of the town, resident of the town, have no faith that in fact you would be able to rely on those standards being in place for controlling the look and feel of this building. So you might want to think about that in how you describe that building. Thanks.
All right, thank you. Next, we have Susanna Musprat.
Hi, Susanna.
Hello there, Susanna Musprat, 38 North Prospect Street. I want to talk about the height of the building. I have heard Evan Ross and several other counselors insist that they wouldn't contemplate more than a 3-story garage. And that included the roof deck, because I asked that specific question. Now, I think tonight I heard Nate say that a parking garage level could be as low as 7 or 8 feet, and you've got a 40-foot height, and that is a 5-story parking garage, which I hope you all are going to say we cannot permit to be in these dimensional standards.
Thank you, Susanna. Next is Dorothy Pam.
Hi, Dorothy.
Hi. I apologize for not having been here earlier. I was at the UMass meeting about the massive demolition construction project, which will take place just north of Fearing and Lincoln. But what I'm hearing is, and I hope I've missed some really wonderful stuff, that the only benefit so far is that if the parking garage does not go through, it will revert to the RG, because you're saying no setbacks. And then to quote Spring Street as an example of them existing, when that is a terrible example, and certainly one that has made people lose faith because every recommendation of the Design Review Board was completely ignored. So what are the benefits and what are the protections for the neighborhood besides there will be some trees? Thank you.
Thank you, Dorothy. All right, it looks like we have no more hands in the attendees. So I think, Chris, you were looking for us to either support or not support having you and the staff continue to work on this and bring it back to another meeting. So do you want us to have a formal vote on that matter? Or do you want just a sense of the meeting?
I think we'd like a sense of the meeting.
All right.
And maybe Rob has a different take on that. I would like to consult with Rob if you would be so kind as to ask his opinion.
Sure, Rob.
No, I think that would be fine. I don't think we need a formal vote at this point, and that'll give us enough direction to finish this up and put it in the proper form.
All right. All right, so I guess the phrase "I'm generally supportive" comes to mind, and so I'm thinking maybe of going through the roll call on how people feel about each person feels. But first, I'm seeing 2 hands up from the board. Janet.
I am generally supportive. I would like to spend some more time talking about specific issues I see. But when I was thinking about this, nobody in the planning department or on this board, as far as I remember from our previous meeting, has come out and said, yes, we recommend that this parcel be, rezoned from RG to BG. And that's the question really in front of the board. And I think it looks to me like we're going to recommend not to do that. And so, I was pondering that, there's really no support that I see for the RG. And I think when we talked earlier, there was really no other zoning district that really fit, right? Because you wanted some more flexibility, you wanted to limit height and things like that. And so that's what we're being asked to do, is recommend to the council this specific rezoning. And it strikes me that what we're talking about is a parking garage overlay that is more flexible and has the limits and flexibility, and we can tailor it to a parking garage, not a zoning district, which has 18 uses. And so I wondered that, we have just embarked on a completely different zoning amendment, and how we should proceed on that, because there's a lot of, there's so many details that need to be ironed out, and language and issues. And so it seems to me this is like a separate endeavor, that we're no longer inside the first zoning amendment. We're on a completely different one with different dimensions. It's bigger, it's smaller, it's higher, it's lower, and things like that. And so that I just have been pondering, like, where are we in the zoning amendment process legally vis-a-vis the town council?
All right, thanks, Janet. Why don't we, well, let's see, Nate, you've got your hand up. Maybe you'd like to take a pass at that.
Oh, sure. I can address that. I think the initial zoning amendment was general enough that it's still within scope. So this was discussed with council, the town attorney as well. So, there wasn't the detail or specificity in the original proposal. So in terms of addressing parking, this is still within that scope.
So
I'd raise my hand.
So your understanding is we haven't departed from one process into initiating another one.
Right.
Okay. Fine. So let's hear from Jack.
Thanks, Doug. I just want to say, I've been, on the planning board for 5 years, and certainly accustomed to taking some hits, but I just wanted to say, I have a couple of things to say, but I just want to say that the planning board, I think, has disagreed with the design review board maybe once. So I would say it's rare, and the Spring Street development was unique, and just wanted to make that clear, because I don't think that was a fair statement that I heard. And then the other thing, just relating to the conversation of the budding lots, and whether it's now or when an actual development would happen, I think it would be short-sighted, not to pull in the abutters and see, if there's some buy-in, maybe, expanding this to something that's even more, functional, be it the St. Bridget's or the CVS lot. I think that has to be done at some point. I don't know, whether it's now or, down the road. And so, that's basically the 2 points I wanted to make.
Thanks. So Evan, you got your hand up slightly before Chris.
Yeah, I just wanted to actually, that's a good segue, Jack, to mention that while I know the planning department hasn't specifically reached out to abutters, there have been conversations with the owners of the CVS lot, and they've expressed support for the overlay idea. I don't know, the conversation hasn't gone to, would they want the overlay to also encompass their district? But the owners of that parcel have been supportive of both the idea of a parking structure and the overlay. No response from St. Bridget's, but not for lack of trying. So the abutters are not unaware that this is happening, and there have been conversations. They just have not happened from the planning department, because as Chris said, this started originally as a proposal from Councilor Ryan and myself.
Great, thank you, Evan. Chris, do you want to add something?
Yeah, I would just want to say that, since this wasn't initiated by the planning department, and it did come to us from town council, but I would kind of want to get some support from the town manager for the planning department to, to make contact with CVS owners or with St. Bridget's, since I think we're in a little bit of an awkward position. As I said before, it didn't originate with us. So if the town manager feels that it would be a good whatever idea for us, for the planning department to reach out to those abutters, I would be happy to do that. But I just need to get that go ahead.
Okay, well, it's great to hear from Evan that they've already had some contact from someone in the town. Maybe it's through Evan. So that may or may not be required. Nate, you have your hand up too?
Sure, yeah, just to say quickly that, there's, I think the public comments, there were some really good comments, and, there are some aspects of the project that would be conditions in a request for proposal that was issued by the town that may, wouldn't necessarily, they couldn't be inconsistent with the zoning, but they could help shape the project a little bit more. And so, right, zoning doesn't regulate some things. And so, my thought is, for instance, how parking spaces are allocated within a facility, the town may want to have, some that are dedicated to public use or patron use, right? And maybe there's a minimum number for that. And then beyond that, it could be really the developer's choice. How can they finance the garage through who parks there? But, so certain things like that really are not, we're not going to cover in the zoning overlay. And then I was going to just talk to the height. In the RG, it's 3 stories and 40 feet. And so, with staff, we took 40 feet as that's what is allowed in the RG. And that's actually measured typically to say if it's a peaked roof to the midpoint. So the actual height of a peaked roof is more than 40 feet because that's the midpoint of the, depending on the roof slope or, style of roof. So, we thought 40 feet to the uppermost level of a wall or screening above the upper deck actually, is pretty much like to, the roof, basically a peak of the roof of a parking structure. So it really does, keep the height down and is, similar to the height in the RG district. So we, I think I just wanted to address that, that's a maximum too. It's not, they don't have, someone doesn't have to build to that height. That is, again, a maximum, not saying you need to build there.
All right. Janet, can you go ahead?
So we are in a sort of a strange spot, I think, Chris, in terms of where we are. And so I was wondering if we could just vote not to recommend the zoning change, but keep working on this idea, because I think it's a good idea. And I think it solves a lot of problems. I think I would feel, I have other issues, specific issues to bring up, but also I think it would be great if we sat down with some kind of working group of to work on this overlay. And I think it's it's sort of unprecedented to see a zoning amendment and then voted on it at the next meeting and have it sail forward without more work. And I do think this needs work. I think it's a really strong start. And so I was wondering if the next step would be to put together a working group of, a planning department, a planning board member, somebody from the bid, a builder, somebody from South Prospect Street, and just sit down and hash out like a really workable proposal. And I think it also could be a template for other parts of town, because I think that the disadvantage of the North Prospect, this location is North Prospect Street. There's a lot of people who live along there that can be impacted. You have other sites in town that have very few, either no residents or very few residents, but also those residents would need protection. So I think that we can just vote, hopefully, to recommend not to change from RG to BG, but also vote to recommend to town council that we keep working on this overlay idea and really hash it out and have a really strong, well-worded, document that has a lot of support behind it. And that's something that we kind of ran through because we're sort of at the public hearing and the clock is ticking on stuff like that. I really want to move forward on this idea, but I'd like to move forward on in a way that we have time to go through the detail and talk things out. And I just wonder other people's thoughts about this. Would that help get us out of the awkward jam that we're in?
Well, at least what I heard from Nate was he didn't think we were in quite the jam that you are afraid we are, that we don't really need to vote on the original way the proposal was structured. Chris, do you want to comment on that?
Yeah, when I was referring to this being awkward, I was referring to the situation of my taking it upon myself to go and talk to abutters. And the reason that I am reluctant to do that without town manager approval is to, make sure that the town manager is on board with this idea and that he feels comfortable having the planning department reach out to abutters about it. So that's my feeling of awkwardness. It doesn't have to do with the proposal in general. I don't think there's anything awkward about the proposal. I think it's a good proposal. And if someone were looking for my recommendation, I would recommend that this is a good proposal and it should be recommended. So I also wanted to say that there are 2 opportunities for the planning board to talk about this before the public hearing that the CRC is going to hold. The CRC is required to hold a new public hearing because the charters, or no, actually it's it's the state law. The state law says that the town council has to vote on a zoning amendment within 90 days of the close of its public hearing. So the town council's public hearing was held by the CRC, and the CRC closed its public hearing quite a while ago, and they didn't have an opportunity, or they didn't desire, or whatever you want, however you want to characterize it. They didn't take, and the planning department continued this public hearing, making it impossible for the town council to vote on this zoning amendment. So the fact is that the CRC is holding a public hearing. They're going to newly advertise it on November 9th. So the planning department has October 20th and November 3rd to talk more about this proposal. And the planning department would be happy, I would say, and Rob, I hope, would go along with this, that we would be happy to keep working on this and make it, a stronger proposal. So I would be reluctant to go along with the idea of voting this down or not recommending it at this time. I would want to keep working on it, at least within the time frame that we have. And I believe that by November 3rd, certainly we could achieve something that people would feel comfortable with.
All right, I want to mention that it looks like George Ryan has joined the meeting. Thanks, Chris. Andrew. And by the way, if we could, we've been going almost 2 hours, and I'm not sure how long people want to spend on this evening, since we are going to see it at least twice more. So I'm hoping we can get a roll call on whether people are generally supportive, probably in the next 30 minutes, let's say. Andrew.
So I'm just getting warmed up, and we had 4 hours. Like, we're at halftime. I think I just want to make sure.
Oh, you want to take a break?
No. I think if I heard you right, Janet, you're saying let's just clarify when you clarify that we're not going to change the underlying zoning, and I think we've heard that, right? That we'll keep it as RG. Makes sense. I think I know I have a couple of like minor changes that I think I might, just from seeing this, that I might recommend for the proposal. I don't think it's going to be very much. I'd love to see what Nate comes back with, and I feel like we probably have, we've got some letters of support in our packet from local businesses supportive of this. I feel good, certainly, to answer your question, Doug, of like, do we generally feel good about this? I generally feel good about this, and would feel comfortable asking the team to just make the tweaks we've talked about, and then let's kind of do our homework over the next 2 weeks and bring some good questions in to try to put this thing to bed. Because if we can make this happen, I mean, gosh, like when you sent that thing out, Janet, from like 1980, it's like 40 years we've been trying to get this thing. It's crazy. So anyhow,
okay,
I'm in support.
Okay, thank you. Rob?
Thanks, Doug. If you don't mind, just a question for Chris actually here. I just wanted to make sure I understood the dates properly, because in my notes, I have the CRC public hearing on this scheduled for October 26th. And I just wanted to make sure if that changed, I just wanted to make sure that I'm not missing that. There's another parking amendment that was scheduled for November 9th. So if that's true, and I see Chris already shaking her head, the October 20th planning board meeting ideally would be the time to make a recommendation on this.
Okay, that's helpful. So we really don't have two more chances to deliberate before CRC wants to hear from us. Janet, you have a brief last comment?
So I think it sounds like people are in support on moving forward on this. And so the other issues I had were, I think we should have special permit, not site plan review, because we need to take a close look at this project, and site plan special permit gives more tools for adjustments and sort of controls. I do think we need clear design guidelines to match the historic district across the street. And the fact, we keep on talking about form-based zoning. Let's do a form-based wall and just start with showing what we can require. I would want the mechanicals tower to be away from North Prospect Street. And then I would like more detail on sustainability. I thought it was like hopeful and positive, but I thought there were some specific things that we could require. I also thought, like, if the roof is not going to be used at the time, it could be a green roof. And maybe, if it's not going to be needed for parking. The other thing is that I know we're requiring EV chargers. We're going to need a lot more than 2 chargers. I know the EVs are coming. And actually, I think if we had fast chargers, we would attract people to the town, because you open up your app and you find out, like, most of them are on the interstate, but if there were fast chargers in Amherst, people would come and charge their cars, and that would be more stuff. So I wonder if there's more green things than just saying sort of aspirationally, we want green sustainability, but maybe more specifics on that. And then I was a little confused by the applicable sections and why they come in and why they come out. Like, I thought that could be tweaked up a little bit.
All right, thanks, Janet. And Nate, I guess as I hear what Janet's talking about, I'm reminded that I think at least at some point there would be an RFP, a public request for proposals, and that document might have more definite and more specific requirements for what the proposals can, or the responses need to contain. So we could get more specific about charging stations and proportion of spaces that are devoted to public short-term parking. So am I correct about that?
Right. So yeah, I mean, we'd have to come up with comparative criteria, and there could be, design criteria that has things like, it's highly advantageous or most advantageous to have, the parking, our towers, further from North Prospect Street, or it's more advantageous to have a higher ratio of EV charging stations, or other things, other amenities. So, yeah, I mean, I think that, I think staff can consider what, there are a number of comments here. It's really then, what's feasible to have in a zoning overlay. Is it going to be so prescriptive that actually, is detrimental to the project? And so the RFP is where we can have some more conditions that, we'd want to see in a facility or in a design, in a response. And that's where we can have some of that.
Thank you. Chris?
Oh, I wanted to thank Rob for correcting me about the date of the public hearing that the CRC is going to hold. But even so, the CRC is holding its public hearing on October 26th. They don't have to make their recommendation on October 26th. So if the planning board hadn't made a recommendation before that, the planning board could still consider this on November 9th, or November 3rd. So the planning board could take, the time it feels that it needs to come to a conclusion about this. So I just wanted to offer that. The planning board could consider this on October 20th, and it could consider it on November 3rd and come to a conclusion then, and the CRC could come to its own conclusion.
And the agendas for those 2 meetings that we have, are they very full?
They are October 20th, you're considering mixed use buildings. So You have that on the schedule, and you also have a parking lot for the Potic Coal Conservation Area. Those are the only two things you have on October 20th.
Right. Well, we could easily spend 2 hours on the mixed use building, and we've spent 2 hours on this, and we could spend another 2 hours, I suspect. So that could be another 4-hour meeting very easily. Jack.
Yeah, I just want to follow up on something Janet said. I guess with regard to the roof, I mean, does the current overlay allow parking on the roof? So there actually would be 4 levels of parking, because right now I feel like the garage is on the smallish side, and I think that roof parking would be paramount, and then solar on top of it in terms of those on the stanchions, whatever, is what I would read between the lines is what we were thinking. But I just wanted to make clear that the roof is not a roof. I mean, it would be a 4th level of parking.
Okay, that's it.
All right, thanks, Jack.
It's just a question, but.
Yeah, I think it probably depends on how we structure the RFP and whether we want to maximize the number of spaces or we want to get something else on the top surface. Chris? You are muted. Chris, you're muted.
That was a legacy hand. I'm sorry.
Okay. All right, so we've heard a couple people say they were generally supportive. We didn't go through every single member. I guess I'll ask at this time, is there anybody who is not generally supportive? Raise your hand if you are not generally supportive. All right, I don't see any hands. And so at this point at 8:34, I guess we can continue the hearing to October 20th. I guess I'll need a motion. And Chris, do you have a time specific we should put in the motion?
The Potic Coal Conservation Area is scheduled for 6:35. And so you could schedule this for 7 o'clock.
All right. So I guess I'd like a motion to continue the hearing to October. It's the October 20th at 7 p.m. Janet?
I move to continue this hearing to October 20th at 7 p.m.
Great. Thank you, Janet. And Andrew?
Second the motion.
All right. Going through the members. Maria?
Approve.
Jack?
Approve.
Tom?
Aye.
Andrew?
Affirmative.
Janet?
Yes.
And Johanna?
Aye.
And I'm an aye as well, so that's unanimous.
Doug?
Yes, Janet.
I want to just jump in and following up on something Johanna said, it is true that if you read our agenda, you would have literally no idea that we're talking about a parking overlay district. And so, and you wouldn't know to look for it. And so I'm wondering if the planning board could publicize this fact, or the next time we post the agenda, describe, it better. But we have these community participation officers that keep on telling me about district meetings and the League of Women Voters having something. And I wonder if we could get that word out in a more effective way. I now find out the bulletin will no longer be delivered to my home, so that's not effective. But I wonder if there's a way we can just reach out and just tell the public, this is what we're working on. Can it be a banner on the town website that, and I know the parking garage is this like explosive issue. And when I first moved to Amherst, I couldn't believe these people constantly talking about what looked like a really chill underground parking garage. But I just think it's important that, we be out there and get support for the garage instead of like, kind of it erupts and people feel like they're kind of blindsided. So is there something we can do to inform people what we're working on? Because it's a good project and we want to hear what people think and, you know, let them vent their feelings and offer their good suggestions.
Thanks, Janet. Chris, you want to comment on that?
So I think Janet's suggestion about wording the agenda differently is a good suggestion. I think we can roll in what we started out with and talk about what we're doing now. I think we have to keep going with what we started out with because we have this public hearing that opened a while ago, and we're taking advantage of the fact that this public hearing is open, but we can do a better job of describing it on the agenda. And then, you know, internally, we can talk about how else we can get the word out that this proposal has changed significantly since it was introduced. So we'll work on that.
Great, thank you. All right, I don't see any more hands. So, and we've continued the public hearing. So we'll move on. Do we have any old business? Chris?
We have no old business as far as I know. Yeah, none.
Do we have any new business?
I would just like to address the issue of the open meeting law complaint. We got another one today. We've already gotten 2 of them, and they relate to minutes that have not been approved and posted. The planning department does have a plan. I think you're all aware of it, to deal with this issue. We've been given the ability to hire somebody who takes minutes for town council and CRC to catch us up on our old minutes. And Maria has been very generous with her skills in taking the minutes for the current meetings. And many of you have already written minutes. I'm 3/4 of the way through the 5-hour July 21st meeting. But so I just wanted to bring you up to speed. I'm going to be writing to the complainant on Tuesday, the 12th of October, which I think is day 14, and telling her what our plan is and how much we've accomplished since we received the complaint. And I need to send a copy of that to the Attorney General's office. And then after that, I'll address the complaint from the other person who is a local person. The first person was from California. The second person is a local person. And the third complaint came from the person in California. So anyway, we're working on addressing those. And thank you very much for all of the planning board members who have stepped up to help us out of this hole. And we hope that by October 20th, we will bring you minutes that you can review. I actually wrote an email to you all last night, and it contained the minutes, 3 sets of minutes that were written by planning board members in addition to Maria's minutes, but I never sent the email. Not that you would have had time to review them before tonight anyway, but I just wanted to bring you up to speed and tell you what we're doing to address this issue. Thank you.
Right, and so, you know, you've got several minutes from a couple of board members, and I think every board member volunteered to do 1 set. So those who have completed their minutes, we won't be coming back to you again. And Maria, we're hoping to let you off the hook with your minutes, probably maybe the next meeting. I think maybe 1 more meeting might be enough. But those who haven't finished their minutes, Chris, would ideally you have at least a draft you could send the complainant on the 12th? But, you know, would you like to give people that target?
Yep. Yes, that would be great. If you could get me a draft by October 12th, then I can send it off to the complainant, the first complainant, and the second complainant, I'll probably send her what I've got too. So
and can we post our drafts on the town website before they are approved or not?
I think we could. We'd have to label them as drafts, but we could do
Okay,
that.
well, I guess I'll look to you to make that call as to whether it's worth the effort, if it seems like it's going to be a while before we actually approve the final version or not.
I'll consult with Pam.
All right, Andrew.
Thanks, Doug. I was wondering, would it make sense just to have like a meeting with a single item, which is just approve the minutes? And we could do that, sometime within the next 2 weeks to be able to more closely comply with the timing for that.
Chris, what do you think of that?
Well, that's a good idea, except I'm going to be going out of town on Friday, and Pam is taking Thursday and Friday off for a family event and Tuesday, and then Monday's a holiday, and we would have to do this meeting probably on the 13th, which would make sense, which is next Wednesday. So I think we could meet on Tuesday, the 19th, October 19th, and just do minutes on the 19th if people are available then. Would you like to do that?
Andrew?
I think if it's something that will help us address the complainant, then it seems like it's a reasonable thing to ask. We can just jump on for literally 5 minutes, hopefully. I suppose that there could be some questions about the minutes, but maybe that's something we can, I don't know.
Well, if we have all the drafts by, the 12th, that could give people a couple of days to look them over and send any suggestions to Chris, so that maybe she and I have gone through those comments and responded in the way we think would make the best sense, that they could all be ready by the 19th. Is the 19th useful for your timeline with the complainants or the Attorney General, Chris, or should we just wait until the 20th?
Well, may I answer that? The 19th is a week after we are supposed to respond to the first complainant, and I would say did I say that right? Yeah. We're supposed to respond to the first complainant by the 12th, and the 19th is the date that we need to respond to the second complainant. So, anything after the 12th is problematic, but it's better than nothing. So, yeah, if we can meet on the 19th, that would be fine. That would be good. We'd get those off our plate. We could post them as, final draft, final approved minutes, and then we could move on to the next set. So that's probably a reasonable thing to do. Are people available? Do you want me to send out a meeting request tomorrow in the email and ask people if they're available, or do people want to say now whether they're available for the 19th?
Well, let's see. Why don't we go through everyone here? Janet, are you available on the 19th?
Well, I was going to say I think we just have to give a response to the complainants and just say, here's our plan, here's some minutes, here's our plan, we're hiring somebody, and you can post draft minutes on the website, and so I would just go with that, and then I'm not gonna have sit down for 5 hours and draft minutes and have them ready by next week, and so I don't want to slow the group down, but I don't think we have to resolve all the late minutes by the 19th. And so
the 12th really won't work for you?
Yeah, I think it's too fast. And so I think we're all diligently working on our minutes, or everybody but me, but I would rather not plow through sets of minutes plus the agenda. I think the packet and the work that we're doing is really important. And I think we can do a couple of sets of minutes at our 20th meeting, and then I think it's fine just to do a few and the rest in November, and just as long as we're making progress and we give a plan. And if we're posting our drafts, I think we're in better shape. So I think I'm eager to get this behind us, and I maybe I'll go ahead and do the minutes that you were going to do, and then we'll have those all finished. Pam, I see your hand.
Yep, I am probably won't have mine done by Tuesday either, if I really stick to the idea that I have scheduled time off. So I'm just putting it out there, and I have a big one. I have a 5-hour meeting that is 2 public hearings that include the CRC.
Okay.
So
Chris, how do you feel about, having most but not all by the 12th?
I think that'll work. We'll have most, but not all by the 12th. We're going to get some from Emily, who's helping us out. And I'll write a letter to the complainant and copy the Attorney General, and I'll send copies to all of you outlining what our plan is and what our progress has been. And I don't think that's going to be a problem.
All right. Do you think we need to have a specific date by which we promise to have them all finished, or can we leave it open-ended?
Interesting question.
I would like to say the end of October.
Okay. Pam, would that work for you? The end of October?
Well, at this point, I have the May 19th minutes that I am responsible to do, which I will work like a little rabbit after this weekend, I promise. I get what happens to me is I'm so diligent, but then it's also time to build another packet and attend another meeting and, all the other little things. So it's hard for me to say, but yeah, once I get through this weekend, if Chris Brestrup tells me it needs to be done by such and such a date, it will be done.
Okay.
Right, Chris?
All right. Chris, your hand is still up? No? Okay. And remind me of the date you gave, Chris?
Gave a date of the end of October.
End of October. So Janet, would that work for you? Yes? Okay, good. Andrew?
Thanks. I just want to make sure none of us are accidentally doing the same minutes, right? I know I was given a date, but just when I hear someone say that someone else will pick it up, like it's all perfectly assigned?
Yeah, I have, I kept track of all the dates and made sure everybody got a unique date.
Perfect.
And,
Thank you.
And Janet, I'll leave that set of minutes with you. Sounds like we don't need to rush quite as much as I thought. Okay.
Thanks
I guess
to
that,
Maria.
Yeah, well, we do want to let Maria get back to full participation. So, and hopefully have, I guess, Pam go back to doing the minutes for the meeting in real time as soon as we can. So thanks everyone for that. Chris, no other new business?
No other new business.
Okay. Form A, A&R?
Yes, we do.
I promised you I wouldn't have another topic, but we do have a Form A. And so if Pam can bring that up, I'll show it to you. It's on Market Hill Road. And it is a property that is owned by the Stoge family. And there's a house on it. And you can see the property here. So Market Hill Road is between Flat Hills Road and East Leverett Road in North Amherst. And the property is surrounded by the turquoise line. And now, and it's actually two properties. It's the yellow property and the turquoise property. So if Pam will bring up the A&R, I can show it to you.
This one?
Yes, thank you. So what
I have
they're
it a
doing,
little bigger.
Thank you. So what they're doing is dividing this property into 5 lots. This property here is a kind of strange shape, but it does meet the zoning requirements. It's got the square footage that's needed, which is.
Chris, we cannot see your cursor.
I'm sorry. Okay. Pam can use her cursor. So there's a strange shaped lot at the western end, which kind of horseshoes over the existing house. And this lot has a greenhouse and it's got a barn on it, but it does meet the zoning requirements of 30,000 square feet. And it has more than 150 feet of frontage. So that lot is okay. It's got its building circle drawn on there, the 150-foot building circle. So that's lot, I can't read the number. Is that lot 5 or 6?
I think it's lot 8.
It's lot 8. Okay,
It
so
is
that's
lot
lot 8. The lot to the immediate east of that, I think, is lot 6. That's the lot that has the house on it. It also meets the requirements of 150 feet of frontage and more than 30,000 square feet. As do the other 3 lots, which are more conventionally shaped, 5, 4, and 3. Lot 3 is a flag lot, and it has more than twice the number of square feet that it needs. It's got, with its access strip, it's got more than 60,000 square feet. So that those are the lots, and what you are declaring is that this doesn't have to go through the subdivision control process. And you're not creating a new road. All the lots are frontage lots. So I think you can feel confident that this does not have to go through the subdivision control process. And what you would be doing is authorizing Doug to sign this A&R plan.
All right. Do we need a formal motion, Chris, or
No, you can just ask if anyone objects.
anyone object to that? All right, I'm
All right.
not seeing any hands. I guess we need to schedule our next meeting in the back parking lot.
That's right. I'll send you an email.
Okay. And that's it for the Form A&Rs?
Yep.
Yes.
Report of chair. I really don't have anything to report. Report of staff.
I don't have anything more to report.
All right. And then, so at 8:54, we can adjourn. Thank you
Thank you.
all. And thanks for all your help again.
Thank you all.
Thank you.
Night.
Thank you, Maria.
Good night.
Thank
Good
you,
night.
Maria.